This is The Space Shot, episode 238 for January 7th, 2018. The Cosmosphere Podcast, episode 4, Triumph and Tragedy, part 1. Hey everyone, welcome to The Space Shot, your daily space history, pop culture, and news fix. I'm John Molnix. Yesterday we learned of the passing of American astronaut John Young. I'm working on an episode specifically about John Young that will be out in the next few days. He lived an incredible life, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of his achievements with you. Today's episode is part 1 of the latest Cosmosphere podcast. Apologies in advance for some of the audio quality. I was recording in a workshop, so bear with me on the audio. This episode is a longer one, but there's some really cool historical tidbits in this episode that I wanted to share. One final update, SpaceX is scheduled to launch the Falcon 9 Zuma mission later tonight. I'm going to link to that live stream on Facebook, so be sure to follow The Space Shot on Facebook so you don't miss these announcements. Now, let's dive into the first part of the Cosmosphere Podcast. Welcome to the Cosmosphere Podcast, Episode 4, Triumph and Tragedy. I'm your host, John Molnix, and I'm a volunteer at the Cosmosphere. You can catch me here on this podcast, as well as on my daily podcast, The Space Shot. The Cosmosphere Podcast is still new enough that your reviews will help make a big difference in how many people can find the show. We would love it if you could leave a review in iTunes or on Google Play Music. You can help spread the word about the incredible work that's done at the museum simply by leaving a review for the podcast. On the first Wednesday of each month, we dive into a new topic. This month, we're taking a trip to the Cosmosphere's SpaceWorks facility. We'll also hear from Carla Stanfield about what's happening at the Cosmosphere this January. Then we're going to finish up this episode with my conversation with Brad Noost, the Director of Education at the Cosmosphere. We talked about some sad chapters in American spaceflight history and how NASA overcame those tragedies. One more thing before we get started today. If you'd like to find out more about the work that the Cosmosphere does, head to cosmo.org and check out the information on the world-class education and outreach programs that are available. At the end of last year, my dad and I were lucky enough to have a tour of SpaceWorks, and what follows is the audio from that visit. Without any further delay, let's head to SpaceWorks.
So this is SpaceWorks. We've got two facilities. This is our 6,000 square foot high bay facility where the F1 engines were restored.
Okay.
And then the other building I'll take in is the main shop.
Okay.
So what the guys are presently doing is they are getting this area prepped for the restoration of the original mission control consoles from NASA Johnson Space Center. So
very cool.
We'll bring all the consoles. This is Jack Graber.
Hi, nice to meet you guys.
Hi, Jack.
How you doing?
John.
Hi, John. Nice to meet you.
John does a podcast that he's been nice enough to volunteer his time to showcase and highlight us. So part of what he's doing is a segment on SpaceWorks. But Jack is our Director of Technology, but as of January 1st, will oversee our SpaceWorks division.
Very cool.
So Jack and Don, who's hiding, are getting the area prepped. So when the contract gets signed, which we're hoping will be in the next couple of weeks, these guys will go down. I don't know if you've been to Johnson Space Center.
Once.
Okay. So the historic mission control, they'll go row by row and take a row at a time and bring those consoles here. And then this is Don Ike.
Hi, Don.
Brett Moments. We'll take the consoles row at a time, bring them up here, and about 3 months per row, they'll restore them. So literally go in and clean them, remove any corrosion that's there.
When we first walked into the SpaceWorks facility, we were greeted by a jet engine from an SR-71 Blackbird that was covered by a large tarp. It took us a few minutes to walk around and just kind of get our bearings in the massive warehouse, and it was a really cool experience just soaking it all in for the first time. You just heard Jim Remar talking about some of the restoration process for the consoles that are located at the historic Mission Control Center in Houston. The Cosmosphere is going to be restoring the consoles of the MOCR, or the Mission Operations Control Room. Let's jump back in and hear Jim talk a little bit more about that process.
Jack and the guys then will also reanimate them. So part of what NASA wants to do is when a visitor walks into the viewing room, the MOCR comes to life, and so these consoles light up.
Yeah.
And, we've spent an enormous amount of time researching and talking to the flight controllers to understand how each console works and what it did, and what buttons lit up, and what data would be on the screens. And so then the guys will recreate that, and there will be a visitor experience to where the visitor comes in and they'll see it, and then MOCR will, it'll be up, as they come in, and they'll see it, what's going on, and then they'll hear the audio of the lunar landing, and then the TV camera will, the stuff will come up on the screen. So it's, it's been neglected for how many years? When they left after the early shuttle program and went to the new operation, they haven't done anything to it.
Yeah.
So an architectural firm out of Houston has been hired to take the interior back to what it was during the Apollo 11 mission. So from the wallpaper, the carpet, to everything, what's on the consoles, and
That's cool.
You name it, it'll be back there. And it'll be an awesome preservation when it's all done.
Wow.
But along the walls, just artifacts from our collection. We've got about 10,000 artifacts in the collection, of which about...
So it's like most museums. Most of what you have is actually you can't display.
Exactly. We only have about 8% of the collection on display.
Wow.
All the large stuff are obviously kept here. So this is like the J58 engine from the...
As you can probably tell, both my dad and I were like kids in a candy shop.
You're good.
Here's one of the computers from the Mission Control. So you see all these consoles. These are all original Mission Control consoles as well. So most people recognize the MOCR, the original Mission Control, but there was MOCR 2, which was essentially the same thing, but it was the guys who were literally reading the data, and so they were communicating to the front room guys.
They were never on TV.
Exactly. The backroom guys were just as important as the front room guys.
If not
the front
more
room
so.
guys, exactly. The front room guys got all the glory.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so these are the consoles from the back room. So they're identical to the front room consoles.
So were those used just to kind of develop how you're going to restore the front room consoles?
Great question. We acquired these, I don't know, back in the 90s at some point. NASA accessed all of these out of their property, didn't want them anymore, instead of preserving them. So Cosmosphere acquired all of them. They've been literally sitting in this warehouse for the last probably 20 years. Just recently we worked on 2 movie projects. One I can't talk to you about, but the other is First Man.
Okay.
So Jack reanimated 16 consoles.
Yeah.
That will be Mission Control for First Man, which is the production on Neil Armstrong's life. The movie that Ryan Gosling is Neil Armstrong.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
So what was great about it was it really allowed the guys to get an understanding of how the consoles worked, and so it was a trial run for us.
That's great.
And we got to get paid to do it, and our consoles will now star in a movie.
One of the highlights of the SpaceWorks tour for me was being able to see the turbopump component from one of the F1 engines that was recovered as part of the F1 engine restoration project.
This is one of the recovered pieces from the F1 expedition. This is a turbopump.
Can I touch it?
Yeah.
So what's the metal of this?
It's mostly Inconel.
So it's a composite with ceramic and stuff too, right?
No,
Is that what they
it's
do?
it's a cast.
Oh, it's actually cast.
And what you're saying is just the corrosion.
That's just the corrosion.
Yeah. I was telling John that depending on where they found it, there were three things really that would attack it: electrolytic activity, but in this case, it would be calcium and salt.
That's just bizarre to me because you think of tooling with aircraft and stuff.
Right.
Pieces being cut out of a solid block.
Yeah.
I just can't think of very many space components.
During the tour
where I
of
get my head around
SpaceWorks,
it.
Jim also detailed some of the ideas that they have for the redesign of the Cosmosphere.
We're in the process of a capital campaign to raise funds to redo the museum. So as you go through, I mean, it's tired. It needs some TLC.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is basically gut the museum and then open it up, because there's a lot of winding activity, and in some cases it's because all the graphics and information is backlit. So we want to open it up and then really open the artifacts up to where the public can really get around them.
Because I was telling him that's what I thought. In some
Yeah.
cases, it'd be nice to go all the way around that piece.
And that's part of our plan. And then, put some interactivity in there, create some immersive environments, and then take the text where if you want to spend 15 minutes, if you want to spend an hour, if you want to spend all day, there's something for everybody. And so we're really excited about that, because we really feel it will allow our museum to be even more appreciated than what it presently is.
After looking at the artifacts, engineering mock-ups, and all of the goodies that they have in their high bay facility, it was time to move to the next part of the SpaceWorks facility. But before we got there, we took a short walk outside.
I'll take you into the main shop.
Nice to meet you, gentlemen.
Sure, nice to meet you guys. You bet. See you again. Oh, yeah. Sure.
Take care.
So that is an Agena.
Yeah, that's what John said.
Yep.
Look at the Agena as we drop,
Agena.
and I don't necessarily remember
That was
what
the one
that's.
that, malfunctioned.
Yeah.
What was it, Jimmy?
Yep.
I forget what mission, but yeah.
Was this was an unmanned type of
Unmanned, yep.
Okay.
That is a hydrogen tank from the service module. So the big hydrogen tank at the center of the service module, the command service module, that's what this is. And then those tanks over there, those are fuel and oxygen tanks, so that would have been on the descent section of the LEM.
The malfunctioning Agena that I had in mind was part of the Gemini 9 mission. I was a little bit preoccupied with all of the other space artifacts that were there, so I couldn't pull that fact off the top of my head. With the short walk outside done, we made our way into the other workshop at the SpaceWorks facility.
This is the shop, so this is a standard shop.
Yeah. So your people that do the restoration. I mean, obviously they have to know how to weld. They have to know how to fabricate in certain
So
things, and
they
they've
gotta
got.
be able to machine, bend metal, work with metal, weld, work with wood, make molds, paint.
Yeah.
That's pretty much that's what we don't. If we were to hire a new technician, we wouldn't necessarily go and look for somebody who knew about an artifact per se. We would want
A hands-on skills
hands-on,
type.
exactly.
Yeah.
And all these guys come with a varying degree of skill set and background. Dale, who's driving a truck, is a master mechanic, but he's also a finished carpenter and has taught himself how to weld and paint. And Don, the guy you met out there, he is laid tile and did window glazing and things like that. I mean, so you can't teach somebody how to do a skill per se, but you can teach them about an artifact. And once they learn about the artifact, they understand how it was made and what went into it, then they can apply the skill that they know to whether it's the restoration, the replication. I gotta show you guys this piece.
Oh, these are interesting.
So this is a Bendix Mobility Test Article, and this was one of the companies that Marshall Space Flight Center invited to develop a prototype of the lunar roving vehicle. And at the time, Marshall was under the control of Wernher von Braun, and here he is driving the Bendix.
So that's Wernher von Braun
Yep,
driving.
Yep,
right
sitting
there.
right there driving this vehicle.
Wow.
So NASA invited a number of companies to develop a prototype of what
That's
the lunar rover could look like. And so this particular company is a company called Bendix Corporation, and this was the prototype that they came up with as to what a LRV might look
Wow.
like. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So this,
wagon wheels.
Yeah, isn't it crazy?
yeah, that's just, yeah.
Yeah, because those are the wheels.
Yeah.
So they're springy.
The spring. Yep.
Oh
So
my
this
gosh,
it's
yeah.
owned by the Smithsonian, but it was sitting in Huntsville, Alabama, at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center. And so we brought it up here.
So you just charged with restoring it then?
But unfortunately, a museum hasn't stepped up that wants to display it. And so
I'm linking to the picture of Dr. von Braun driving that mobility test article in the show notes. The wheels do kind of look like a wagon wheel, and it is a interesting rover design. After checking out the Bendix Corporation mobility test article, we wrapped up our tour, and it was time to say goodbye.
So that's SpaceWorks.
What a neat thing to get behind the scenes. Thank you so
Absolutely,
much.
my pleasure.
That's fantastic.
My pleasure.
Over the coming months, we're going to have some more SpaceWorks content, so be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of those episodes. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'd appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes. If you do that, screenshot the review and send it to me at John Molnix, pretty much everywhere on the internet, and I'll shoot you a little Space Shot sticker and a thank you. Also, make sure you hit the subscribe button, that way you don't miss any of the daily episodes. As always, the show notes have more information on today's episode. You can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter. Find me at John Molnix. I'm always up to chat. You can also connect with me on Facebook. Just search The Space Shot or click the link in the show notes. Tomorrow, part 2 of the latest Cosmosphere podcast and a recap of tonight's launch and latest Star Trek episode. I'm John Molnix, and I'll catch you on the flip side.